Hello, how you doing, and welcome back to the channel. So the Springboks, as they often do, have gone early in naming their team to face New Zealand this weekend in the Rugby Championship. That's what I'm going to be speaking about in this video. Some observations about the team that has been selected, and also probably just a bit more widely about the whole rotation policy. That seems to be what a lot of people have been talking about at the moment. But if you want to have your say, you can do so in the comments down below. Anything that I touch upon, or just your own views on this side that Jasper Wiese and those Springbok coaches have named. Also, if you can like the video and subscribe to the channel, I'd massively appreciate it. But let's get into it. Just very quickly before I get on to the actual team, which I'm sure many of you would have seen by now anyway, is this whole thing that the Springboks do of naming their team early. I mean, I say early, it's what they've done for, at least a couple of years now. I feel like they did it back in the Lions series. They did it most of last season as well, where they kind of name it on the Tuesday ahead of the game at the weekend, where the deadline tends to be around Thursday when other teams name it. I just like it. I mean, it's entirely up to them. It's up to other teams when they do put their squads out there. But I just like the statement of intent every time, that they're not trying to play games. They're not trying to hide what the team selection is. They're pretty upfront of, this is our 23. This is the squad we're relying upon to go and do a job this weekend, and if they need to change it with injuries or whatever, they always can. But I just always quite like that approach from the Springboks, and I think it's probably reflected as well, having watched quite a lot of their press conferences recently, of the relatively forthright approach. I don't often get the feeling that they're trying to hide too much. I think they're pretty honest in trying to explain why they've done certain things and what they're thinking with the team. So yeah, look, I like the approach. Speaking about being honest as well, Jasper Wiese has been quite straightforward as well in terms of this whole rotation policy. I'll put the team up on the screen. Look, it's such a good squad. I mean, I said it against Australia, even though some people were branding the South African side as a B team. I made the point that it was still massively experienced, packed full of quality. And that's the way it proved in the end as well, with a really one-sided scoreline and a pretty impressive performance from the Springboks. So on the rotation, many of you would have seen this already. They basically sent, 14 players basically travelled out to New Zealand early to get better prepared, acclimatise, get over the jet lag of facing New Zealand this weekend. In terms of the selection, 9 of the 15 to face New Zealand are those players that have travelled out there. There's 10 of those 14 players that travelled out early in the match day 23. The 6 players that keep their spots from that victory over Australia is Willie, Roux, Damian Willemse, Lukhanyo Am, and then the front row as well will keep their spots. So rotation from the Springboks, I think this, in all honesty, is probably one of those things that will get more attention than it necessarily needs to, in that I kind of just feel whatever happens against New Zealand at the weekend, win or lose, it's not going to be because they sent 14 players out there early, or they've got 9 players that were able to get there early and acclimatise and things like that. And maybe I'm naive there. I know the All Blacks have had a pretty gruelling trip to Argentina, a pretty impressive and decent win actually themselves there. But even so, they've got that travel and the change in time zones and things like that. The flip side of it would be that the New Zealand squad has been together and been able to train together, whereas perhaps those 14 players, what training, or if any, could they do for the Springboks? So in terms of the debate around the rotation, I wouldn't get too hung up on it. I think it's quite an interesting approach personally. But Jasper Wiese, again, just listening to his press conferences, has said that they are building a squad for the World Cup. So players coming in and coming out, that's something they're probably going to have to do in France. I was looking at their fixtures for the group stages. I think they've got 1 6-day turnaround. So that possibly will be one where they'll look to utilise that squad and have quite a bit of changeover in it. So this is good preparation for that. And the other thing as well with South Africa is I just think their squad has a huge amount of depth. I think on paper, I think in terms of strength in depth, I'd probably go as far to say off the top of my head that they have the most strength in depth in the world, maybe. I don't think they're necessarily playing the best rugby at this moment in time. I think of cohesiveness over the last couple of years, you'd probably say Ireland or France have had a little bit more of that. But in terms of pure quality, the ability to rotate their squad, the ability to change names, I'm not sure that anyone quite matches up to how stacked South Africa are. So anyway, that's my general views on that rotation, and we'll see if it has any bearing. And as I mentioned, I think the World Cup's a key thing to consider here. Rotation may be a part of that. As for the starting 15, in fact, the 23 as a whole, what screams out to me off this team sheet is power from the Springboks. You look at the front row. I know we always talk as well about the bomb squad coming off the bench. They've gone for a 6-2 split again. Malcolm Marx, Thomas du Toit, Vincent Koch, RG Snyman, Peter Steph du Toit and Dwayne Vermeulen. Coming off the bench, that is power through and through. Plus, you're welcoming in, the likes of Eben Etzebeth and Lood, back row, which is quite intriguing, of Kwagga Smith, Franco Mostert and Jasper Wiese. I think they realised that they need to try and get control of this game against the All Blacks. And so they've got a huge amount of power there to be able to do it. And I think that is probably going to be where the game is won or lost, because New Zealand were very good at getting themselves on the front foot against Argentina. And South Africa's discipline was so good against Australia. I was looking at the stats. 3 penalties conceded from the Springboks, which is phenomenally low. Partly because they were so dominant and partly therefore they weren't being put under as much pressure. I think the All Blacks certainly at home will be putting a lot more pressure on the Springboks. So how they're able to deal with that is going to be very, very interesting. And a key part of that I think is going to be in that power game up front. And I think, that is, to me, and I think for probably most of us, when you look at the team, that's what screams out to you. Changing halfbacks as well. I thought Marnie Libbok did really well against Australia. He's on the bench, so you've got Damian Willemse coming in at fly half. He's a versatile player anyways, and he can kind of play fullback, fly half, possibly in the centres as well. And then Faf de Klerk comes in again. It's just a reflection of the strength and depth that South Africa have across various positions, and in particular the playmaking positions, because going into the World Cup, I guess there is still a bit of a question mark there. You'd say Faf is the number 1 at 9. At 10, though, if you've got Damian Willemse, obviously Andre Pollard injured, Libbok came in and did a good job and perhaps just gives a slightly different dimension with ball in hand and being able to break the gain line in the way that they did against Australia. Changes on the wings as well. Cheslin, Kolbe and Makazole, Mapimpi both coming in. I mean, World Cup winning players. Brilliant try-scoring record for both of them as well. Kurtley Arendse, you maybe feel a little bit hard done by. But I think when they've gone for that 6-2 split on the bench, you need Grant Williams and you need Libbok in terms of just giving you that options. I think maybe that's the reason that Arendse drops out rather than anything to do with his performance, because again, he seems to be a guy that has come into international rugby and looks so at home, incredibly dangerous. And it goes back to my point of just kind of the strength and depth that the Springboks are building. The final point that I did want to mention actually was something that we've spoken about on this channel quite a lot over almost the last year, not quite or so, which is South Africa developing their game plan. And again, I think it was something we saw against Australia, because we still saw the power game, we saw driving mauls, we saw pick and goes close to the line from the forwards, but we also saw the ability they have with ball in hand and the way they have tried to develop that attack. I think that is still something they are continuing to do. How it gets on against New Zealand, who will, I'm sure, throw some tougher questions at the Springboks, and how they're able to answer them in terms of the way they attack the game will certainly be something that I'm keeping an eye on. But again, it's just something that if I was a Springbok fan, I'd feel pretty encouraged about. I don't think it necessarily means they're going to win the World Cup. We can't say that at this stage, but I just feel like they're developing their rugby in a way which I think could put them in position to be able to challenge teams in different ways when it gets to a World Cup, particularly with the players they have there and just the danger they have all over the pitch. So Springboks go early with their team. Is this the team that can beat the All Blacks? I think we'll have to wait and see what the All Blacks name in terms of their starting team, because they have some question marks over quite what they do. Damian McKenzie came in at fly half and looked good, but do you go back to a Richie Mo'unga or something like that? Sam Whitelock, I think we can probably expect to come into the second row. In fact, how the All Blacks try and counteract or maybe even react to this team selection from South Africa will certainly be something to keep an eye on Thursday, and what sort of tussle we're going to see. But as I said already, I think that power game, I think up front, who wins that battle at the breakdown, the gain line, all those key areas and key metrics that we're used to deciding games, I think it's probably going to be the case again. And it proves to be another brilliant match as well. You would imagine probably the winner of this, they certainly put themselves in the box seat to go on and win the Rugby Championship, and you would probably back them to be able to do just that. Remember to drop a comment down below. Let me know what you think of this team, any of the points I've touched upon in the video as well. Also like the video and subscribe to the channel. It just helps that algorithm. It helps the channel grow, so I massively, massively appreciate it. And I'll see you in the next one.